Unsurprisingly, some of the demons in the Diablo series started out incredibly weird. And when Diablo 2 released in the year 2000, the series didn't just grow in core mechanics, Hell's forces grew too, becoming stranger, nastier, and somehow even more creatively disturbing. The developers really fleshed them out, and I mean that literally, because there was a very real topless quota during development, which we shall soon touch on. To uncover these hidden gems of grotesquery, we must first delicately descend to Diablo 2's bestiary, a catalogue that hides some of the most bizarre, overlooked, and downright cursed entries in the entire franchise. This video aims to explore a selection of the wildest designs and weirdest backstories across all 5 acts of the game, but really building in shock and awe, so stick around.
I know that the better part of my soul will remain behind. Forever.
Before we jump into the video, I want to quickly announce, I really wanted a shirt with the town portal from Diablo 1 but couldn't find it online, and so I realized others may want them too. The official storefront is linked in the description. If you're interested in grabbing a shirt, use the promo code DASH for 20% off your first order as a thank you for your ongoing support. When you first venture outside the rogue encampment, you're soon swarmed by packs of twisted, shrieking former sisters, begging the question, how did an order of elite archers get turned into undead berserkers overnight? And the official manual gives us our first clue, stating, the corruption of their sisterhood is perhaps the worst atrocity that their surviving rogues endure. The sight of their own sisters marching against them in the service of the enemy drives the sisterhood into deep despair. The tainted sisters are seldom caught alone, preferring to attack in groups. Many of the corrupted ones have forgotten their skills with ranged weapons, or are so driven by hell's rage that they blindly melee with whatever weapon is at hand. So these once discipled scouts went from precise long-ranged archers to frothing melee ghouls, and that alone is tragic. But then of course there's Bloodraven, the rogue from Diablo 1, literally raised from death and still firing arrows like a possessed undead sniper. Though most folks know this, the further you dig, the weirder it gets. In a now famous Twitter thread, Diablo 2 designer Phil Shank shared the early concept art of the corrupted rogues, and the images explain everything the game never mentioned. Their faces are warped into demonic masks, their bones tear through their skin, their torsos split open with fleshy tendrils, and their death animation shows what looks like a dragon skull demon being exorcised out of their body. They're not just possessed, they've been hollowed out. But by whom? A question we shall tackle soon, but first, what's really funny and bizarre is that the rogues here open up an insane real-world design aesthetic, as did you know. Phil Shank went on to explain that their hellish sexual aesthetic was, quote, a couple of thoughts around the nudity and Diablo topic and in general. We had to exaggerate stuff to show on a tiny sprite scale. Each pixel on screen equals 1 inch on model, so things look ridiculous up close. We exaggerated everything in caps: models, textures, animation, and quote-unquote anatomy. The influence was more Euro horror than metal, which surprises me. Nothing wrong with metal, we were just going more gothic horror vibe at the time. But what about the famous topless quota we heard that was handed down to the artists? Well, Shank continues, the topless category was very tongue-in-cheek. It's a funny story, and none of us took it very seriously. It obviously set the tone that nudity and gore and creepy weird anything was okay, and it served as a reminder to stay edgy and dark. Now, what's humorous here is that the nudity mandate was technically not enforced, as Shank remembered, and he was later told to cover up the undead rogues. That's why tendrils cover their body. However, as another lore tidbit, being the early noughties and wanting to sell the game to teens, the promo that magazines used from Blizzard was less modest. In regards to the lore reason for the rogue's look, most players assumed that Andariel simply flooded the monastery with rogues who had mysteriously betrayed their own kind, though the real story is, of course, much darker. Andariel didn't just corrupt them, she betrayed the sisterhood from within. But the lesser evil's part in this nightmare is quite unsettling, so it deserves its own spotlight, and will save the Maiden of Anguish for last. I'm going to hazard a guess and say you've been backhanded once or twice into the dirt by a furry freight train near the Tree of Innovis. And that's when you know you've met one of Diablo's most deceptively tragic monsters, the Wendigo. Most notable is the aptly named Treehead Woodfist, who is in love with his tree. But here's the thing, why would a tree guardian be so unhinged? Shouldn't a creature named Treehead be some kind of peaceful druidic forest spirit? Well, according to the official Diablo II manual, that's exactly what he used to be. Reading, the gargantuan beast, brute, and yeti, Wendigo subspecies, were previously known to coexist peacefully with humans, avoiding contact whenever possible. Chaos's ill effect have changed them, as they're now quick to anger. Few live to tell the tale of an angered Wendigo. So you're not just killing beasts, you're putting down corrupted wildlife, creatures once content to live in caves and forests, now warped by hell's presence into unstoppable claw-swinging berserkers. Unfortunately for Treehead, the axe forgets, but the tree remembers. And this beautifully segues us to another demon you may not expect to have once been friendly. You'd be forgiven for thinking the whip-wielding saber cats are like any house cat, evil and out for blood. And honestly, the old to hell and back Diablo D&D supplement didn't help, describing their cruelty as saber cats enjoy chasing prey down and often play with them before striking the killing blow. Of course, they're leaning very heavily into the feline angle. But here's where things get weird, because Diablo II's actual bestiary paints a completely different past for these feline fiends. Reading, saber cats are a race of bipedal intelligent beings, once found in the jungles of Kyrgyzstan, trading freely with the cities there. They had never before behaved in a threatening manner toward human society. So these whip-wielding kitties were once polite jungle merchants with bustling trade routes. I hate to make a cross-reference, but they're the Khajiit of Sanctuary.
Khajiit as wares, if you have coin.
But what changed? When caravans began disappearing across Aranok's dunes, people assumed the cats had turned feral, but scholars had a dark theory. Some enlightened sages believed they were summoned or otherwise moved en masse through hellish measures. Translation, they didn't choose violence, they were A, relocated, forcibly uprooted and displaced, and B, corrupted by demonic forces in the process. And now that once aloof, civilized feline culture exists only as hunting packs, armed to the teeth, ready to pounce on any unlucky enough to cross their path. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say nobody likes sand maggots. Not now, not in the year 2000, not ever. They're, okay, let's go through this. Goo-filled, corrosive, tunnel-popping nightmares. I can go on, but I should mention one person at Blizzard loved them, because their lore reads less like Diablo and more like David Attenborough narrating Animal Planet. As their lore entry reads, sand maggots are actually arthropods and not worms at all. These insects were once a staple diet for desert inhabitants. The eggs gathered and prepared as a protein-rich paste. That's right, people used to eat them. Sand maggots weren't born as Diablo's most hated creature, they were lunch to some. And the bestiary proudly continues, the paste enhanced the nutritive value and flavor of meals. Flavor of sand maggot paste. But hell, as always, ruined everything, even a good chomp, as it was discovered the eggs, larvae, and flesh have acquired poisonous properties. Adults spit a highly toxic, corrosive substance. So these things went from regional delicacy to acid-spitting subterranean terrors, and the strange part that makes it Diablo, of course, being the mechanic that enhances aggravation and dealing with a demon by tenfold being, they burrow to heal and re-emerge somewhere else. They hit, they run, tactical maggots that once used to be dinner. There's another creature in Act 2 that gets overlooked just as often as sand maggots, being the Leapers. And surprising no one, their lore is just as strange, if not stranger. If you've ever wandered the dunes, emphasis on dune, of Aranok and been ambushed by a gang of hopping nuisances, you've met the Leapers, creatures seemingly designed to test your patience and mouse accuracy. But their lore reveals something almost oddly tragic, reading, Leapers have an extremely slow resting metabolism to minimize water use and storage. That's right, their whole existence is about not dying of thirst, which has got to be tough in a desert where everything either bites, stings, or spits poison. And, of course, when they see you, all they see is a juicy adventurer. A giant blood bag to slurp on, if you will. As the bestiary elaborates, these creatures never pass up the opportunity to eat or drink. Packs, sighting a potential meal, leave their resting spots and work together to bring down their quarry. When you think about it, Leapers aren't monsters per se, they're just thirsty. Aggressively, violently, relentlessly thirsty. Obligatory Dune meme.
Listen, I gave...
And now we arrive at the final entry in the Animal Planet section of Diablo's weirdest monsters. Giant spiders. Even as an Australian, something about Diablo's giant spiders, or in any game when they're that big, it just feels wrong. They're not just like big, there's something deliberate and slow. They stalk, they wait and amble and softly follow you in an unnerving way that spiders do when they're deciding when they're going to strike. But despite the horror movie behavior in game, their lore is actually surprisingly chill, reading. Even in their largest forms, giant arachnids have never been much of a problem for the inhabitants of the tropical forests. Large numbers of the spiders now actively seek meals of the human variety. These creatures are highly poisonous, but often flee when struck, sometimes spinning webs to entangle pursuers. I don't know why I'm getting so amped up by this. I feel like if hell can make cows hostile, giant spiders are probably a cakewalk. One of the weirdest little demons in all of Diablo 2 has to be the Fetish, or fetishes, probably plural, those tiny jungle terrors who sprint at you screaming, then they're either spitting fire or throwing darts, and occasionally will form a demonic totem pole to burn your health bar to zero. I remember first seeing them and thinking how funny they looked, until I got swarmed. And their official bestiary description paints quite a vivid picture as to why. Shamanistic creatures, known cannibals, small intelligent beings in league with hell, individually weak but formidable en masse. When accompanied by a shaman, they are doubly dangerous, as the shaman can resurrect their fallen kin. The shamans are often borne upon the shoulders of a lesser fetish, believing that added height makes them look more ferocious. Now, it's funny that they were trying to add to their height like they're insecure, because Blizzard actually removed certain D2 lines of dialogue relating to the fetishes. And this is probably the weirdest part of the lore. Why? Because the original game probably leaned a little too hard into the tiny jungle warrior stereotype. And the OG Diablo 2 assassin, Natalia, had a voice line describing said fetishes while giving you praise, saying,
"You are truly amazing, stranger. There are precious few items in the world that would tempt me to go up against the children of Zakarum and their midget minions.
Now, the word midget was completely removed in Diablo II Resurrected, which to me is odd. It's not describing a person, but a small demon. Maybe Blizzard thought it was controversial, or perhaps they quietly agreed with Alcor about Natalia.
Yes, Natalia is a cute girl. However, I think she could use a special potion. Let me see here. Radiant beauty? No. Ray of sunshine? No, that's not it. Ah, here it is. Relax, frosty bitch. This should help her out.
Speaking of swarming, if you've ever been swarmed by those floating horrors in Diablo 2, the wraiths, although they don't really look scary, their backstory reveals a horror element you probably weren't aware of. Reading: wraiths are ethereal physical manifestations of tortured souls from the planes of the hells, driven by an intense hatred for the unsuffering living. Now, of course, it is sad that somebody dies and they're in hell and they see the living waltz through and think, oh shit, I don't like the fact. It's a little confronting that you're not suffering. Let me add to that. But the thing that really pisses me off in Diablo is that if there is a demon or any entity that you shouldn't mess with, guess who gets involved? As their lore further states, they're drawn to places of pain and suffering, or summoned and bound powerful mages to serve as unwilling guardians. Mages consistently ruin everything good and wholesome on Sanctuary. Though the silver lining, RE mages, is the manual clears up perhaps why they've got a taste for mana. Reading: contact with a wraith can quickly drain one's life force. Spellcasters may be drained of health and mana, which is spirited away to slake the spiritual thirst of these damned souls. Take that, you cocky mage prick. Okay, I know I've been hard on mages and things have been strange and there's a lot of levity, but this is where the video is going to get dark and, well, I guess more personal. The first being mummies. When arriving in Loot Lane, you probably remember being beseeched by local healer Atma to find a monster that has ravaged her family.
I don't expect this of you, but if you want to help me, I would be grateful. In the sewers below our city, there lurks a horrid creature that hungers for human flesh. The creature has killed many, including my son and my husband. If you destroy it, I will reward you. Please, be careful, though. That beast has taken enough from us already. The sewer entrance is through the trapdoor, just up the street.
You'll later learn that this creature is a variant of the mummies that occupy Act 2. Their story alone shows the cruel nature of the primes, as their lore notes. The inhabitants of Aranak have long practiced the art of preserving the dead. As a reverence to the deceased, priests fill bodies with preservative fluids, then wrap them in specially treated cloth and bury them in tombs below the desert's surface. This mummification is believed to provide benefits for the deceased in the afterlife. Physically, a mummified body maintains its flesh and sinew for hundreds, even thousands of years. Under Mephisto's manipulation, these honored dead have been summoned and bound with the spirits of malicious demons to fill the ranks of his undead army. Instilled with the eternal loathing for the living, mummies are stronger and better suited for combat than the zombies who, due to their advanced decay, are weak and infirm. Mummies are slow-moving, but can deliver powerful blows, often with a touch of poison from the chemicals used in their embalming. Fallen mummies often burst asunder from their wrappings, leaving behind a poisonous cloud that the living should best avoid. Sad, and of course on brand with the primes to resurrect fallen heroes, but here's where things take an even darker turn for the people of Loot Lane. We learn of a super unique mummy, Radament, in his lair. The townsfolk, in a bid to stop the monster, barricaded him in the sewers and his resurrected army, although what they find is ghastly.
I've personally found some of that devil's victims washed up out of the sewer. Often they are missing limbs or a head, and their bodies have always been skinned. At first, the creature raided the town at night. That's how Atma lost her family. Now we've got him barricaded in the sewers. You're safe up here on the surface, but every now and again some fool wants to be a hero and heads down to the waste tunnels with a pig sticker.
But why? Well, Drognan, a Bestiary mage, then asserts.
Farah and I have been talking about the creature recently. From my studies, I have deduced that it is Radament the Fallen, an ancient Horadric mummy that has for some reason left his tomb to prey on mortals. I'm doing some more research now. If you check back later, I may have some more insight as to his nature.
And when finally confronting the monster, we see he bears a human arm with claws, indicating he was using human body parts in his experiments, a point we soon learn. Once felled, studying its lair, it seems that Radament was trying to construct something with various body parts far beyond a mummy, with a flesh shoot hanging from hooks and even dead animals. But why? Well, rather gruesomely, Drognan finally reveals.
I've just been reading something interesting about this sort of undead. Apparently, certain Horadric funereal priests altered the bodies of their dead mages with magical and surgical techniques, often replacing body parts with those of animals. This was thought to augment their powers and raise their status in the afterlife. From what you tell me, it would seem that Radament was bent on the task of reviving his own mummified corpse with the flesh of the living. This is very unusual indeed. It takes an incredible magic power to alter the singular purpose of an undead mind. Perhaps there is a power at work here, which is beyond my ken.
What's sad about these mummies, outside of murdering Atma's family and the locals en masse, is that like the skeletons of Diablo I, turned out to be interred Horadrim underneath the labyrinth, resurrected by Diablo. Unfortunately, what's shocking here is that Radament is stated to be one of the original Horadrim, meaning he was named, and he may well have been one of the biker-looking mage lads that Chris Metzen drew in the Diablo I manual, given a second life after death to terrorize the living instead of guarding the tombs of his brothers in Aranok's desert, as Cain once stated.
The Horadrim used to mummify their highest mages and infuse them with spells that would allow them to protect their tombs, even after death. I have no idea why one of them would be acting so malevolently.
Unfortunately, this just shows the reach of the primes. The mummies that were once guardians then terrorized the town, wearing the skin of some of the townsfolk's kin. Can you imagine if Radament wandered into the town in a flesh suit? I can't imagine the horror of Atma seeing her family's face, mockingly worn in a grotesque countenance.
They say that the taste of vengeance is bittersweet, but I find it to my liking.
Speaking of darker, hidden lore of the evils, and circling back to how the rogues were corrupted, it's time to explore Andariel's influence.
Fear me.
Andariel, the Maiden of Anguish's design, is perhaps the most confronting of the evils. For me personally, I remember being a teen when Diablo II came out, and I had really mixed feelings when Andariel first stomped her size 15 hooves, and more than ample figure mind you, after me in my first playthrough of D2. I was, as a teen, torn between survival and the small thought that being caught may be worth it.
You want die like last men visit Amazonia?
What'd they die of?
Crushed pelvises.
Yeah!
What are you, gay?
Design-wise, Phil Shank not only helped create Andariel and the Rogue's signature look that is inextricably linked to their menace, but also the lore behind Andy that isn't mentioned in the game and bizarrely makes sense in its own dark and twisted way. First, before the lore, let's talk more about the design. Andy, as she's affectionately known, once sported horns and back blades in the concept phase. It was Shank who said, quote, turned them into articulated appendages like a spider or giant hand. Great for attacks, good for poses and silhouette. Very expressive, unique, also bloody terrifying. I absolutely hate the thought of being caught in a bear hug by her and 4 scorpion stingers coming out of her back to sting you to death. Anyway, what's amazing is the original concept art had Andariel have chicken feet instead of hooves, which I think could have played well but is slightly less aggressive. I keep thinking of this idea she's a hodgepodge of animal parts like a female Baphomet or Chimera. It just adds to the terror. But what of her lore? How did she first come to guard the East Gate at the behest of the Wanderer/Diablo? Well, interestingly, in Diablo 1's cut content, which will appear at the end of this video, Andi, the Queen of the Succubi, was supposedly summoned by a witch to aid Diablo in luring able-bodied men from the town.
The succubus is a demon that feasts upon the essence of mortal men. You will find that Andariel has quite an appetite. The town will soon be devoid of any adult males unless you stop her feeding now.
And have her minions tear them apart until the warrior puts her down.
You lure no more men to their deaths.
Also intriguing is that the blacksmith Griswold was not tempted by Andi, and she took her revenge on poor Grizzy and D2 during her resurgence. But how was she summoned in Diablo 2 specifically? For years, players believed Diablo summoned her directly, as that's what's said in game. But the truth is far more unsettling. As remember how I said Bloodraven was the rogue from Diablo 1, a part of the Sister of the Sightless Eye which was demonically repurposed for the minions of hell? Well, apparently the entire sisterhood was misled by one figure, as Phil Shank was not only in the art department, but he wrote the direct excerpt, which reads like a page from the Dark Arts and outlines Andariel's return, reading, "When the Sisters of the Sightless Eye who had fought Diablo under Tristram returned, they had fought ferociously and gained in strength and prowess considerably. Bolstered by their triumph, some thought that the time had come for the Order to rise in stature beyond the strict traditions of the Sightless Eye. Their horizons, it seemed, were expanding as never before, into new realms of possibility. One rogue named Morena, perhaps the greatest veteran of the battles, gained permission to establish a formal assembly that would develop into a new school. This institution would study the mystic arts of sorcery and alchemy in order to increase both their physical and spiritual power. Many things had been learned in the trials against the demonic forces, and they acquired ancient and powerful artifacts, which hinted at undiscovered powers. Mystic tomes and scrolls revealed potent energies that had never been known before. The sisters were determined to harness these things and use them to further the cause of the sisterhood. The new assembly quickly developed revolutionary techniques to improve their skills in combat. They learned to delve farther into their spiritual center to harness powerful energies that could be focused into physical speed and power. They formulated elixirs and potions to heighten their perceptions and strengthen their bodies. They discovered arcane rituals that could be used to protect them in battle and summon terrible spirits to their aid. There were some in the Order who were concerned with these advances. They were fearful that the assembly was moving too fast and that such powerful things might not be able to be fully controlled. They asked Morena to slow down the pace of her endeavor so that they might more fully comprehend the full ramifications of the powers they were bringing on themselves. Morena was a proud and powerful woman, and she was excited and tantalized by the things she had glimpsed, but her respect for the elders of the Order held greater sway, and she agreed to their warnings. It was then she received a vision. In her dream, the matron of the Sightless Eye herself appeared to her and told her that she need not be afraid, promising that a new age was upon the sisterhood and that they must waste no time in preparing for greater trials. There was an incantation, the matron claimed, that would enable Morena to provide guidance to her people directly. The assembly was to be the new voice of the Eye, and she would bestow great gifts upon her daughters. The Eye revealed to Morena a vision of great enemy who was beginning to move against her people. Great sacrifices were to be made, but the sisterhood would emerge triumphant, but only if the eye were to be unveiled. Morena and the assembly decided that the eye, above all else, must be heeded. They moved in secret because they knew the rest of the sisterhood was not prepared for the responsibility that was bestowed upon them. The incantation was a long ordeal that involved many rituals in sequence. It required that the sisters grasp the deepest fears and hatreds and harness them into pure power to use against the forces of the approaching evil. There were many meditations and potions that promised to strengthen and alter their bodies as never before. When the final ritual was performed, the sisters were completely transformed. Their true queen appeared to them in a visage of a great and powerful woman. She was a glorious sight, and the new sisterhood praised the final arrival of their blessed mother. The queen then told them the time for their blindness was no longer. A new reign was beginning that would bring great woe and anguish to their enemies. She revealed her name was now to be Andariel, Queen of Vengeance, and as a final gift, she bestowed the power of true sight. Suddenly, it seemed to Morena and her sisters that their lids were finally opened to the truth, as she took on a new name, Bloodraven, commanding her newly empowered rogues. All was at last revealed to them, and the enemy was clearly visible. Their fears and doubts left them in an instant, and they were left with only the ferocious certainty that the blood of their enemies must run freely. If there is one lesson, and one thing I love, is that how every kindness and act of heroism, or even attempt in the Diablo series, is repaid in full by the forces of hell. Thanks so much for watching. Please like and subscribe for more Dark Lore, and as always, till next time, Wanderer.
Why did I follow him? I don't know. Why do things happen as they do in dreams? All I know is that when he beckoned, I had to follow him. And from that moment, we traveled together east, always.